Go.
Hello, guys. This is the CJP podcast, the first episode. If you know any better, we actually had a previous episode. If you're an actual fan, true fan, or I sent you that episode, you would know better. This first episode, we're going to be talking about Passover, coronavirus, modern situation. If you're a young Jew in today, that's where our topic conversations could be around today. Ruth White. I met Ruth while taking a gap year in Israel, a very Jewish thing, and Ruth, what I really looked up to, I literally called her Abba as a joke, but in most jokes, there actually has some sense of truth. And I looked up to her because she was a few years ahead and had much more life experience than I did. Because I live in a privileged household where my life is really easy and things were definitely, and I learned a lot from Ruth. Ruth, anything you want to say to introduce yourself and give the ethos of why should we listen to you versus anybody else? Because I think you figured out some things a lot of people haven't figured out. Some things my 86-year-old grandma still hasn't figured out. I think you figured it out.
Well, thank you, Paul. I really appreciate those kind words. That was actually really sweet of you to say. And I'm very excited to be a part of this podcast. Thank you for inviting me. I mean,
Oh, before you start anything, I would appreciate you hit the record button on your end as well. So I can, if anybody knows, you should have two audio streams just in case one audio stream has bad audio. So if you can, hit that record button for me and I'll have you compress that and send it to me later. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're all good. It says, please request recording permission from the meeting host. How do I do that?
Okay, that's a problem for the next podcast. We'll just continue.
But all right, we'll figure that out later.
Yes. So where I was saying before I cut you off, why should we listen to you, Ruth?
Why should you listen to me? That's a hard question to answer on the spot.
Ruth.
I feel, well,
that if you know the story of Ruth is the first convert. So she is a big part of it. And I think you do hold some of the qualities of your namesake.
Well, thank you, Paul. Appreciate that.
And
well, I mean, why should you listen to me? Speaking again from my own point of view, I'm only going to speak from my point of view, and I'm not going to try to speak for others unless I actually feel like I'm permitted to in some point. So like I might speak on behalf of some women, or I might speak on like behalf of some Jewish women, or speak on behalf of some of the gay people in America, but I'm not necessarily speaking as fact that everybody thinks in the same way as I do. And I think that one thing that I appreciated, as you mentioned in the podcast, the secret podcast, was that you like to have conversation, and I'm also somebody who likes to have conversation. And I mean, as you experienced, we have some very different points of view. However, the conversation that we had about it was so good, and it was lively, and we were both listening to each other, and it was never like an aggressive argument where we hated each other. There was never like a point of resentment.
It did become aggressive, though. You can admit that. We were passionate with our words, but we both entered the conversation with a baseline understanding. We're going to eventually agree to disagree. Let's have passion. The world's too short. Life is too short not to be passionate about things.
Always. Like, I would say that I have a love for you as my son, Ben Chili.
Abba.
So like, I'm always going to like have that love and friendship for you, and I can agree to disagree with you. So I think that if you listen to me for any reason, it's because I'm only going to speak in a genuine way.
I will say one point. I'm right and you're wrong. And you would agree with me. If you had as many premises I have, you would of course come to the same conclusion. I haven't talked to you for the next 7 days straight, and then you would have to agree with me. There's too many points to make in a normal day conversation.
Well, we can just talk for 7 days. We'll have 7 podcasts then. There we go.
Ooh, exactly. We'll be like and on the 8th day, it's like a great miracle. And on the 8th day, we've convinced the masses and everyone is on our side.
And then the Lord rested.
Exactly. The Mashiach, 8th day. Amen. Marcus,
amen.
8th day. Amen. So
Speaking of amen, how was your Passover?
Passover is good, but before we move to Passover, I think more current events are more important. I want to make sure for all the people who are not Jewish and don't have a full care about Passover, let's first talk about Corona situation. Fair. And how are you entering this Corona as someone who I think is educated on more things than most people actually care and actually cares about things? How are you doing about Corona? How is it treating you?
I think, okay, well, I'm definitely going to say that my experience with Corona is probably much more stable than a lot of people in America and in the world in general right now. Um, I currently am lucky enough to be living with my mom. I just went back to school full time.
How
So
old is your mother?
she's in her later 50s.
Later 50s, in
Yeah.
general good health.
Yeah, she's in general good health. She's
Have
a
a good
teacher
immune
though.
system.
Yeah, so she's healthy. My brother's healthy. I'm healthy. And we're all in the household.
Any grandparents, older people in your family that you care about that are elderly?
Not in the household. The only people, my grandparents live in, I'm blessed enough to have six of them.
Oh,
I've got
wonderful.
two in San Diego, I've got two in Los Angeles, and then I've got two in Seattle. So
Oh, wow.
they're all doing very well right
That
now.
just sounds like another podcast they're going to have, but I'll focus on this one about coronavirus and Passover. We'll definitely save that topic of conversation for another time because that
All
sounds like
right.
a Pandora box that I would definitely want to open.
Well, my family is definitely an interesting topic.
Hmm. So it seems like, and you said those grandparents and they're self-isolating. They're
Yes,
making
they're
sure
all
that,
isolating for the most part. Again, like my family is doing very well. Currently, nobody in my family is sick. I know some people whose families are sick, and I have been thinking about them. And I'm not very like religious, but I consider myself spiritual. So every so often, I'll pray in Hebrew because that sounds kind of right
uh,
to me. So I've been
okay,
saying
okay.
like the prayer of healing for people and their families.
Oh, that's another podcast right there. But we'll of course when we come over Passover, we'll talk a little bit about that and what do you see as Passover on the religious side. That if you're still interested, listeners, and you want to listen to that point, we'll breach of this subject. So back to the coronavirus, it seems like you have elders across the United States. It sounds like in many different places, and you're still. It sounds concerned but not anxious. Concerned, not cautious. Or I think a Dr. Mike something aware, not anxious. I like to say Corona concerned, not Corona panicked. There's
Yeah,
many different ways to say it. So an educated young woman, it seems like you're what would you gauge your stress anxiety level at?
I think as far as what we should expect from the general public in stress and anxiety,
I'm
mine
talking more
is
specific.
relatively low
Yes,
because I think that's all I can do at this point is maintain my sanity. That I think is going to be
your mental
for the
health.
general, yeah, for the general public. I think the biggest fight of this is, of course, like stay safe, stay healthy, but then, of course, like stay sane.
Yeah,
Like you
I,
got to figure
I,
out how to be able to be in your own skin by yourself in your household or with people who you might not necessarily spend a lot of time with, or if you're like I've been reading some stories of some of the LGBT youth across America, how they have to go home to households where their
oh,
parents may be in the Bible Belt and they're kind of
ooh,
homophobic.
well, I can say that I don't associate any, like, I consider my a religious person, and I do not associate any way, which way, to anybody who abuses anybody based off things that they can't control. Maybe you can abuse people if torture ants as a kid. Maybe I wouldn't be so mad if the parents slapped that kid. But things that are so basic as your sexual attraction to people, if you punish people for that, you're going to go to hell. I'm confidently going to say that. And the
Oh,
people
I
in the Bible
wholeheartedly
Belt,
agree.
and the people in the Bible Belt who think they're doing it on the side of Jesus, based of my understanding of Christianity, based off of loving Western civilization, I think Jesus is actually the greatest person to ever live. I think you are going against your own religion, and you're going to go to your hell. If
I don't even
if
know what I
everyone
believe
has
in, but you're going to hell.
like if I think you're going to your hell based off my understanding, maybe you know better, but you're definitely going to my hell. That's for sure, Jew hell. And all in Judaism, all you have to do is follow the 7 Noahide laws. Okay, so focus it back up to coronavirus. I think people are panicked right now is because of a lack of information. I was first panicked as well, but I was already prepared for some things. The more information I got, the less panicked I get. And I think the main reason why I panic is because of the mass media, where panic means clicks, and clicks means more views, and views is more money, and such like that. And that's why there's an invested interest to create panic. And there's reason to be concerned. I don't think there's reason to be panicked unless you're immunocompromised or other situations. And even then, if you just understand the basics of calculus and biology, those two basics, I think you should be concerned. And you can do the protection, PPE, within your own life, personal protective equipment, personal protective social distancing in your life, that to be safe. And I think there shouldn't be really any person in this country that should be panicked right now. I'm more concerned about, like you said, you have sexual abuse, the domestic abuse, the suicide, the depression. I'm more worried about that than right now, me personally, than the actual disease of coronavirus and the illness and the pathogen and the pandemic. I'm, like people say, I'm more worried about the cure than the actual illness.
It's funny, I could almost counter that with, I think a lot of the paranoia comes with too much information, because what I have been seeing is a lot of information that is conflicting with itself. So like,
Oh,
I remember in one day I saw one, like from various sources, some more or less credible than others. But I saw one that was saying that coronavirus could not be passed through the air, that it was for sure passed through like droplets on something, or touching something, putting your hands on something. But then the next article that I read in the same day said that it could totally be passed through the air.
I would
And
say
so
that
that was a little bit scary to be
I'm
like,
I'm saying
oh,
that's because of a lack of, there's a certain things on information where a little information causes you panic. Unless you have all the information, you're not going to stay calm. Uh, so it's a question of, based off of my understanding, I studied the CDC. I don't read news articles about coronavirus. Maybe I'll read the first few paragraphs, the topic paragraph, but I don't read past of that. I read the headlines. Like, is that a terrible thing? No, because I don't care what an what a writer at the New York Times has to say about corona. I care what the public health expert has to say about corona, and I care what the economics expert. I read the Wall Street Journal as my probably primary source of news, where I build off of. And if there's an economist writing, I will read the whole article. But mostly, why do I care what a writer at the New York Times have to say about corona? I listen to the CDC. I listen to Dr. Fauci. I listen to Rebecca Knox. And I came to this position after listening to 30 to 40 different infectious disease experts and health departments across the world and how they're dealing with. That's why I'm not panicked. And people are not willing to put that hard work in. A basic amount of information is going to cause you more panic. But if you have enough information, I don't think you should be panicked. Like I said, a basic understanding of how viruses work, the history of viruses, and how SARS, this is not the first coronavirus we've had. It's called COVID-19 for a reason. 19 because it came out, it crossed species in late November from a bat to a penguin. I forget exactly what it's called. That's why it's called COVID-19. I personally learned about coronavirus mid-December. Why? Because I'm interested in East Asian politics and I noticed it. That's why I'm not concerned. I'm more panicked about the cure. I think the
did
public
you
just don't have enough information. And if they did, they wouldn't be panicked. They would just be concerned.
really quick, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but did you see there was an image going around? It was just sent to me over Facebook by a friend, but it was a newspaper article, and it was the article where it was talking about Kobe Bryant and his daughter passing in the helicopter crash. And on the same page, there was a paragraph, it was like in the bottom right corner, about the coronavirus starting to become an issue. And I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, damn,
I
nobody's like, I didn't see that. I don't think anybody that I
oh
know saw that until
you
it
want to
was
know
too late.
exactly how I heard about the coronavirus? It
How'd you
was
hear?
I was I'm very interested in East Asian politics in China, and I was very interested last year and still interested in the Hong Kong protests. I was reading Reddit blogs about the Hong Kong protests, and they said a weird strain of viral pneumonia is popping up in protesters, and that's when I'm like, oh god, this could be serious. Pathogens are serious. So I did more research, and that's how I heard about it mid-December. I knew it was coronavirus early January. And
Do
the
you often
comments,
use do you often use Reddit as a jumping off point to find other articles, or is this from people just posting on Reddit?
the only reason I was on Reddit is because I was interested in the Hong Kong protests, and that's what the Hong Kongers are using. And that's why I was on Reddit. I do not use
Oh.
Reddit. I
Oh, no,
use,
no, that wasn't like a to say that you weren't
oh,
giving
no, no,
credible
no.
information. I was wondering because also kind of going back to
Oh,
what we were
I was
talking
just
about
saying,
with credible sources,
I
was that
think,
sometimes I'll read these articles to find information that I should look up to find more credible sources about and really look into the information of kind of as a jumping off point rather than like a final destination.
okay, I would say that the articles itself, you have to look at the meta of the article, not what they said, because everybody, like in a the point of language is in your intent, the actual words and the interpretation. So I just totally look into the intent. I understand the New York Times is going to have a New York Times bias. The Wall Street Journal is going to have maybe a center-right bias. The New York Times, a left-ward bias. The Vox.com is part of my ways that I look at news. It's going to have a left bias. Huffington Post, which is part of my news, that is going to have a left bias. Daily Wire, which is part of my news, probably my second jumping off point, is going to be a right-wing bias. I understand. National Review has a right-wing bias. And you just got to understand, if you actually, or the start of our countries, they were news sites for each political party. And I think if you're honest about your biases, there's no reason that you can report with your biases. I don't believe in the idea of objective news because it's impossible. We're humans. We're going to have selection bias. We're going to have biases implicit that you don't even know.
That's an insightful and important point to make.
So the way I collect my news is I literally read the news site across the political spectrum and I come to my views.
I remember that we talked a lot about like sourcing our information when we were in Israel, and we talked about how we get in like our news, and you were saying that frequently you'll look up independent news sources and then you'll also counter their points with both kind of party side of what they're going to say about it. And I thought it's a good way to actually get all the sides of the information. I mean, as many sides as you can reasonably get.
I don't hold an opinion on something unless I read at least across the spectrum. Like current event news, I don't really say my opinion until I've read across the spectrum.
Love it, and I appreciate it.
And I don't think enough people do that. Enough people talk out of their ass, and that's what I want to change. A lot of people, like what Rabbi, not Rabbi Naparstik, one of my other rabbis in earlier times literally said, sometimes people be spewing verbal diarrhea. And I think that's the wisest thing that rabbi ever taught me. Of all the Tanya and all the Gemara he taught me, that was the lesson that I learned the most from that rabbi.
You are an action guy. I mean, you approached me about this podcast this week. That was mere days ago.
Yeah, and
you made it happen immediately.
I was so happy to hear that someone was as motivated as you are. Your response was the perfect response I was going for.
It was an amazing idea. I love it. Move the world forward. Let's make the world a better place. I think that's ultimately what humanity is about, is striving to be good people and to be the best people we can be. Why not?
That's a completely other podcast. I think
we'll get there.
A good place of my meaning of life and a meaning of life that I have an argument that is outside of God that would require people to become better. And I have an argument for that I've been formulating, that the words are kind of hard to come by. I'm still formulating that argument through my speech, but I think I have one. So that's a completely different podcast.
Okay, so
going back to the coronavirus. So we're alert, not anxious. Thank you, Dr. Mike. We're doing good. Sounds like your family is good. Now, speaking specifically to people our age, I don't want to go into that. I think that's a good enough for the coronavirus. I would like to pause this so we can take a bathroom break, a little chat. Me and Ruth here can chat, see how we're talking about, and pause it for the recording and see what's going on. I'm hit the pause button right now, and I will be back and I'll reintroduce. Hello, welcome back to the Kayla, Joshua, Paul podcast, CJP with Ruth White. We just took a little break. We talked a little bit, make sure that we stay on track right now. We just finished up our talk about coronavirus and living in corona times while keeping that mental and emotional health important. One last thing I want to say on that point is I'm very curious when we do retroactive studies of this, how statistically, how much did we shut down the economy and how much that really hurt domestic abuse, suicide, and other things. And these are questions that should be considered that I hope the experts are considering. Of course, me and Ruth here don't have the numbers, but I hope someone in the situation room deciding these things is letting Trump know that these are important things as well. The emotional and mental health of the populace should be weighed against the public health of, corona public health. Anything else you want to say to that point?
No, actually, I don't even think that I've heard that little perspective that you just gave. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
I'm saying the point that we have presidents or people like governors and decision makers is so they can listen to the experts and come to the best decision. That's the idea.
No, not that one. You were saying something about looking at the numbers.
Well, that's my meta point. My meta point is that health experts that are psychiatrists and therapists should be in that room. Economics experts should be in that room. public health experts like Dr. Fauci should be in that room, and it should be up to our governors and our local mayors and everybody to make that decision. It shouldn't just be health experts in that room, because other parts of life are also important. We're talking about livelihoods. I saw a statistic: 1 in 5 small businesses will fail. That's people saving up all their lives to start a small business, and because you shut down the economy, that's okay to let that small business fail? No. I think the people who make these decisions, Gavin Newsom, Andrew Cuomo, local mayor, I don't know what my local mayor is, should individually consider all these things and come to the best decision for their people. That's why I think Andrew Cuomo is doing a wonderful job for his state. I have no problem with him complaining to the federal government every 10 seconds, because he's a New Yorker and he needs to protect the interests of New Yorkers. I'm kind of a little iffy on Gavin Newsom. He's doing all right. This is someone coming from the right. But that's a totally different podcast that we can explore it on a different note. If you want to record that podcast, you want to keep it a little bit more focused. If you have anything you want to respond to that point, you can respond. But besides that, let's move on to the criticism of the secret podcast.
No, I just wanted you to say that louder for the people in the back, that mental health and that the economy for small businesses really needs to be looked at right now. Mm-hmm. Anyways, moving on. Okay,
so the secret podcast, what things I want to say about it. First, if you actually are interested in my first podcast, first things I would say about it, it's a little profane. That I re-looked at my situation and see how I want to present myself to the public. And no, I don't want to be profane. I'm actually trying to start a movement where our generation, we can make the world 100% better. Let's not make it 10% better or 20% like most generations do. Let's make it 100% better. Let's make the world we want to make it. And what that means, whatever for you. I know it means something different for me and it's different for Ruth, but I'm sure listen to your Yetzer Tov, listen to your good side. You know what side that is. Change the world in your life, in your local community, or first before your local community, your family, outside of your family, your group of friends, outside of your friends, your local community, outside of your local community, your state, outside of the state, your country, outside of the country, Western world, outside of the Western world, the world as a whole. We should move out and start small, first in your own life, and then in your family lives, and that's it. And that's the point of this podcast. Let's make the world a better place, and that's what I want to say. But I will use my podcast as an example. If you want to listen to it, I would more than confidently say this podcast is 100% better than the first podcast. And the third podcast, I give like a C plus B minus, if I'm going to be honest to myself. I wonder what you would, like, give a grade right now, Ruth. What would you give? I'm putting you under the pressure. I'm putting the interrogation line. What would you give the first secret podcast grade-wise?
Okay, so the first secret podcast, I think I would give it a little bit of a better grade than you were if you were turning it as an assignment, because, that was the first test run. That was the first time that you really had sat down with somebody and had made a recording and really had conducted the sort of interview conversation. And so I think that you walked into very new territory, and listening to the podcast.
I know it's my first time. Ruth, you do not have to be gentle. I'm talking as a metric of podcasts. How would you rate it?
Okay, well, compared to all the professional podcasts in the world, more like a DC.
Right. My grade was taking account my first time. Okay, now with the first time, what would you give it? Like, you understand it's my first time, all things considered.
Yeah, because it was your first time, all things considered, then I would give you more like a BC.
All right. So it sounds like we're in agreement on how bad it was and how good it was. And all things in life, it's the Goldilocks. Good enough is sometimes good enough. I don't like the saying, if you half-ass it, something is not worth doing. No. Ever heard of the story of Goldilocks? It's really like in life, it's called the Goldilocks zone. The same principles apply to everything. Good enough is sometimes good enough. But that doesn't mean do better. Like, don't do better. Of course, do better. We're trying to change the world. Do better. You have to change your life first. Like Jordan Peterson said, clean your room. Make sure your house is in order before you try to fix the world. Make sure your mental and emotional life is in order before you try to fix the world. And if not, fix your life, fix your family, fix your community, or fix your friends, fix your community, fix your local community, your city, your county, your region, like your state, your region, the federal government, the United States, the Western world, But first, fix your life and work the way up. And that's my point. And I just want to use my podcast as an example, as a perfect analogy, perfect metaphor to do that. I guess it's more of a simile because I'm directly calling it out.
You could
Anything else?
say you can't clean up a spill with a dirty rag.
Exactly. But you can take up all the water, and that's making it less of a mess. And that's my point.
Okay.
A dirty rag is sometimes better than no rag, and that's my point. You can pick up the big bits of throw up after your hangover, but you can't clean the small bits, but you can still at least get the big bits.
No, I was agreeing with you. I was saying.
Oh, and I put like a 3 layers more of the onion for your, your
Yeah, no.
analogy.
I was agreeing.
I think it's a perfect analogy, Ruth. That's my point. That even things that good enough is sometimes better than nothing. Remove the big bits of throw up in your life before you try to remove the whole pile. Okay, it's probably better that you move the whole pile at once, but we're all human. We have a Yetzer Hara. We still have.
How about just nobody throw up? Nobody throw up, and we're good.
I'm saying life is too short not to throw up every so often. Like, get hungover. Enjoy your life. Okay, it sounds like we went in on my podcast as an analogy of thing. Now we will go to the אנחנו יהודים, מי רוצים learn על Passover וכל הדברים של Passover? Let's get it. That's some basic hero. Let's talk about Passover. Let's talk about Judaism and the metric of Passover, because Passover is one of my favorite holidays about cultural Judaism. Culturally, it's one of my favorite holidays and ethnically, it's one of my favorite holidays because the express part of Passover is about anti-Semitism. That's what the Passover story is. We have to live in Exodus in every generation. And I want to first start off is, what is Passover and what is Passover to you? And I can tell you what Passover is to me. But you're my guest, Ruth, on my podcast. Tell me, what is Passover for you? That's what my first question is.
All right. Well, the basic question, what is Passover? Passover is the story of the exodus of the Jews from Egypt. For my family, so for some context for Passover of what it really means to my family, we have had Passover at my grandmother's house. I've been around for 24 years of them. I just turned 24 on April 4th.
Oh.
And this is the first year
birthday.
In 40. Thank you so much.
I had no idea. I need to make sure I'll figure out a birthday gift for you. I had no idea that. I'll make sure to figure out something. And that's
this was a gift.
Anybody.
This was a gift. Being invited to participate was a gift. Thank you.
Oh, that's very kind. But in my mind, I still need to come up with something, so I'll figure something out. Don't even.
All right, I'll take it.
Don't even try. Let me enjoy your. Let me, your friend, get you a gift.
Thanks, Paul.
And before we start this Passover thing, I just want to say a total separate banter about myself. Ruth knows me as Paul. Some people know me as Caleb. Some other people knows me as Josh. And that is 100% serious. I have people in my life.
3 first names.
People in my life that refer to me, like significant percentages of people that refer to me by each of my names, and I love it. Because life is too short, and it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious. It's like a Larry David joke. It's like
I like that even when we were even on the kibbutz, like everybody would still call you a different name.
Yeah, I would say most people on the kibbutz, however, would call me Paul.
I think so.
Yeah,
because probably it's a little more easy to say.
Because my name is Caleb, or in Hebrew, Kalev, which is Caleb. One of the 2 spies that went to Israel. He was the leader of Hebron, and once after we conquered the land, he acquired Hebron by conquest. And my specifically Kalev is very similar with the Hebrew word Kalev, which means dog. And all the mean Israeli kids in my kindergarten made fun of me and called me dog. And I just said, I was kind of like a wuss back then. And no terms of a better word, I was kind of a pussy. 5-year-old me was a pussy.
Because you could kick just about anybody's ass now.
Well, nowadays I can. Most people. Weight classes are still a thing, but besides that, I have a general knowledge on how to deal with most people, most sizes. And a lot of that, my general knowledge knows fight or flight. A lot of the time, it's better not to get involved in an altercation because it's very, very easy to get knocked out. And if anything of my years of martial arts says, It's very easy to get knocked out. B, you never know who has a knife. C, you never know who has a gun. It's a lot easier to see who has a gun based off how they walk, and it has weight. But a knife itself is very easy to hide. You never know who has a knife. There's no reason that you should get in altercations that turn physical ever. That's unacceptable. As someone who's of anything in my life I'm good at, A is video games. I played so many video games. I can talk hours about video games. B, martial arts, because I'm a black belt in martial arts. I spent 10, 11 years of my life training. One word of advice from that as my ethos, appeal to ethos fallacy. Don't get in fights. That's stupid. Just like on a statistical level, you don't know what's happening. Like, you never know. You can't control enough of the variables. It's not worth it.
Good rant.
Good rant. Let's go back for focus off. So what is Passover to you?
So kind of going back to what I was saying. So Passover for me is a very special day. So my family doesn't necessarily celebrate on the first night. We celebrate usually on a weekend. Usually it's on a Saturday. We'll kind of have like a Shabbat Passover thing at my house. So on a Friday or a Saturday, just depending on what's going on. And
To cut
food
you
is
off,
available when.
I just want to say that's absolutely beautiful. If you're not religious Jew, you're still an ethnic Jew. You're still culturally Jewish. If you're not religiously Jewish, that doesn't mean you're going to be in the gas chamber besides us. You are ethnically Jewish. You should celebrate Passover in some way. If that means buy some crackers, matzah, and have it with some cheese and other bread, that's okay. Celebrate Passover in every which way that you can celebrate. Buy some crackers and celebrate. This is the blood of affliction. Say that to yourself. That's celebrating Passover, and that's better than nothing. Partial solution is better than no solution.
Do yourself a favor, though. Make yourself some charoset.
Exactly. Matzah itself, ooh.
Matzah and charoset, that's the shit.
The Hillel
the business.
Oh, definitely. I've made some points that I don't want to be profane, but we can go to what is the FEAA, whatever administration that allows TV. I'm more than happy to keep that as my. So I think you can use excrement as a word by that definition. I'm not sure.
All right. So kind of going back to what I was saying.
Yes,
so
you
Passover
and your
is a
family
very
celebrated it. Yes.
So Passover is a very special thing for my family. So my papa has held Passover for 48 years at his house. He has made a Haggadah every year for 48 years.
Everybody
has a new Haggadah every year, depending on who's at our table. And honestly, our table continues to grow.
That's beautiful.
I've got a huge family. Again, as I was saying earlier, I've got 6 grandparents, and we'll talk about that later. But going along with those 6 grandparents, obviously there's a whole lot of kids. So my mom has 5 siblings. They've all got kids, and some of those kids have kids.
And on a regular Passover, how many of that giant family? It sounds like a beautiful, by the way. I'm so lucky of your grandfather to have. My favorite photo of any family photo is the grandparents in the middle and their offspring around them. And that's why I love religious families, or Puerto Rican, my family, that have a lot of children, because they have a beautiful picture like that. That's my favorite thing to watch about family photos. What is your usual, Passover? What are we talking numbers? 20 family members, 30 family members?
Minimum 15.
15? That's a good show.
A minimum of 15 family members. And every year we do invite people who aren't necessarily Jewish to our table. We have, as my cousins have gotten married, their spouses have come. My cousin is now showing up to the table with 3 new babies in the past 2 years.
That's like I said, cultural holiday as well, because you can marry into the Jewish culture. Maybe not the religious thing that's very stringent to marry in. The religious, it takes a long conversion, but you can definitely marry into ethnic Judaism, and you can marry into cultural Judaism. So I think that's a wonderful thing.
To say it out loud, just so there's like an out loud thing of it, my family identifies as Reformed Jews, those of us who do identify as actual Jews. And those of us who don't identify as Jews all participate every so often. Some of them will go to service with their spouses who are Jewish. And those who don't, they'll come to Passover. They'll come to other Jewish holidays. We have Hanukkah parties sometimes. We'll all come together and we'll cook together. My grandmother, actually, this was very special. My grandmother gave me her matzo ball soup recipe this past year. So I saved our Passover with that this year.
Oh, that's another story that we'll get to. I just want to make one point that I want to actually figure out a Jewish historian expert I would love to have on the podcast about the Judaism that is religious that we talk about is the Judaism of rabbinic Judaism that lasted 3,000 years. So to think that, oh, the way I practice Judaism is not okay. Well, it's okay because you're a Jew and you're practicing it. That makes it okay. During the times where Judaism was actually, quote unquote, created, founded, there was many sects of Judaism, and just it happens to be the Judaism that survived to this day is rabbinic Judaism. It's because of the oral tradition. It's because of the Gemara. It's because of the Tanya. Because of these individual documents that were written down is why the Shulchan Aruch is why the Judaism we practice today. To think that there aren't other legitimate forms of Judaism is completely false, and that's why me personally, as an Orthodox Jew, I consider myself an Orthodox Jew that is just bad at it. I don't keep the Shabbos. I just consider myself a bad Orthodox Jew because I think those things are important. I just don't practice it in my 20s. I'll probably practice it when I raise my kids, whatever. But in my 20s, I consider myself an Orthodox Jew, and I recognize Reform Judaism as it very much the same way that when Martin Luther created the Great Schism of the Catholic Church, Methodist Judaism Methodist Christianity, Roman Catholic, Mormons, all these are legitimate sects of Christianity. I also see Reform Judaism as legitimate, as conservative Judaism as legitimate, Messianic Judaism as a little less Jewish, but a little more Christian, but still legitimate. Significant things like that. I definitely understand the argument. I might not agree with it, but I understand the argument. And I think that's very important. And that's why I have a lot of qualms with religious Jews, because they look down at other types of Judaism and not see them as legitimate. And I think that's messed up. That's my little rant about the way you celebrate is, I believe in my mind, as legitimate in some ways as the way I celebrate my Seder. So more specifically, this seems like you have quite a showing. You want to just give a ballpark number? What is a typical year? Total amount of people at your Seder table?
Minimum 15, but honestly, we could even see as many as like 30.
That's one.
Depending on how many family members are in town, which kind of brings us into
I say at my Seder, the typical is about 15 to 20, just 15 to 30, maybe mid-20s usually, because my mother loves having guests.
Are they mostly friends or mostly family? Because I know that mine's like 90% family.
Family, friends, and usually one group of people that are people where, you're reaching out to olive branch, people that are new to the community, something like that, where it's a good mix of all of it.
Make sure they have somewhere to eat. That's kind of
exactly perfect. You do a mitzvah. So it sounds like that we hear what the normal is, but in our coronavirus world, we had a new Zoom what we're recording this on right now. So any of those that want to do a podcast, it literally took me 5 minutes online to figure out how to do a podcast. And if you want to do it, speak out. It was no problem. It took me 5 minutes to figure it out. And it took me 37 minutes for the secret podcast to figure out how to do better. And right now, so there's no reason why you shouldn't do a podcast. What was your Passover Seder in the Zoom world? Because you did say you did Zoom it, right?
Yeah, so we did a Zoom Seder this year. And
Let me hear about that.
So we did a different version. So we said all the main blessings. And
first, let's set the stage. I want to build the scene, because we're talking about your family's across the country, right? Were you on Eastern time? You're on Pacific time? You're on Central time? What time did this happen?
So we're looking at 6 p.m.
6
for
p.m. Okay.
West Coast time.
I imagine you have some old people, so they eat early.
Yeah, we usually our meals start at about 6 p.m. Not just because we have old people, but because my family loves to schmooze. So we say 6 p.m., but we normally don't even start eating until like 8 p.m.
Which is a mitzvah to do on the Seder. I do remember the 4 questions of why do we lean. I do recall leaning. That falls in the same category as schmoozing. So I think you definitely. It sounds like the more you release about your Seder, it seems like you do more in a more traditional Seder without even probably knowing it.
In a sense, we do. We kind of take we take the traditional things of Seder and we kind of make them our own. So we have like the practice of the Haggadah. So we do have the Haggadah, but of course it's a modified Haggadah. So we're not having a service for hours and hours. We do that for a few reasons. One of the reasons is we have 5 babies at the table. they will only sit at the table quietly for so long
What do you mean? You
because
give the
there are
baby a
5 of
little,
them.
you give the baby a little maror, they cry a little bit, and then they learn they'll be quiet after that.
Oh, no. One baby starts crying, and then another baby starts
Mm-hmm.
crying,
And then you give all of them maror at the same time.
it's
Perfect.
like a pyramid scheme for crying babies.
Oh, honestly, if only you could bag it and sell it, you would have a business.
Um,
Great
uh,
business model.
but so our family Seder so we had our shortened Seder. So we had the main prayers. We said the blessing over the candles, to the blessing, like the main Passover blessings, and we were going around and kind of talking about like things that we're grateful for. So our Passover is we do Thanksgiving too, but our Passover is also kind of like our Thanksgiving, and we have this little tradition where we all go around the table and we say something that we are grateful for, especially in this past year or in general. And
Okay.
so we did similar thing
Oh,
over
that's
Zoom
lit.
where we muted everybody and everybody kind of said something special about what they were appreciative or looking forward to, or what they were hopeful for in the next, in this next time. And one thing that was said was that although we were sad we couldn't be together, we were so grateful because my cousin in Colorado was able to participate with us for our Seder, along with my cousins in Boston. And
that's
so we
wild.
had all of these people from literally across the United States were able to come and sit at this Seder table, for lack of a better word, for Zoom
yes.
Seder table.
It's perfect. Like I understand that it probably wasn't as momentous as the people inside your like the Seder table, your actual Seder table, but the Zoom definitely opened up a part of the world that you definitely did not know.
Yeah, I would not have been able to see my cousins in Boston. I would not have been able to have Seder with them this year if we hadn't had it over Zoom, because they fly in every so often for Seder. That's, again, like Passover is kind of like our Thanksgiving. That's when my family comes together for the year. That's why we have
I
so
would
many people
imagine
at the table.
next year, even without the corona,
Oh,
without
we're
the
going to have so many
coronavirus,
people. I think
I
next year we're going to
imagine.
have such an amazing Passover. We made a joke next year at the table.
Next year at the table. Oh, that's actually a very funny joke. My dad just walked in. Let me share that with them right now. You know, the next year in Jerusalem, Dad? He said next year at the table. My dad's response, God willing, Baruch Hashem.
God willing, Baruch
And
Hashem.
that's the type of religious house they'll die in. We didn't have a Zoom Seder here because, like I said, we live in a religious household. Maybe we're not all the most religious, but the ideal for our household is that religious Orthodox. And we didn't have a Zoom Seder in mind, but we had a very passionate, very Paul Seder. Like it was a very Paul family Seder. And I want to say that my first night of the Seder, no one was in charge. My dad was in charge, but he still doesn't have so much order. And the second night, I was in charge of the Seder, and I'm happy to share how I will carry on with my Seder. Because honestly, I don't care how many fingers God has in an outstretched arm and how many thumbs and how many things. Those things are completely arbitrary. And if you do a Haggadah that talks about those things, I imagine if you do in an Orthodox household, those things are so boring. So I had a discussion-based Seder that I will expand on once we talk to Ruth and I Seder. I'm here.
That's kind of cool. I'm interested to hear how that goes, or how that went.
It went great, and everyone was happy because I explained to everybody what's the point of the Seder. Like, actually, what's the point of the Seder? And we fulfilled the actual point of the Seder, and we just skipped all the parts that were like all the Hebrew. Maybe we read like one Hebrew section per like page, but we skipped a lot of that. So to go back to your Zoom Seder, what do you think next year you're going to have maybe Zoom with one person that couldn't make the flight down, or do you think next year you're going to super focus on the individual family that's around you?
I'm not sure, because part of me would love for my family to take advantage of this new thing that we tried and invite our whole family, who, no matter where they are in the United States, to have Seder with us. But then at the same time, there's a certain nobody has their phones out at my Seder. If you got your phone out, like, you're screwing up.
I would imagine your whole entire Seder family. I would imagine if anybody's like you, you would berate the person for taking their phone down.
Oh, I'd be so mad that you're on your phone during Seder. Like, come on. Like, there's times to be respectful, and this is one of them.
Exactly.
And so going along with that, I think that there's going to be a certain extra appreciation for really being there in the present in that moment. So I think that,
Can I make a recommendation for you?
yeah.
Just, okay, Seders are supposed to be a few hours long anyways. Just have a 10-20 minute session where everyone hops on the Zoom. And that would be the perfect mix of the both.
That's a
And
good
there's
idea.
no reason that you can't take the meta of what's the good part. This was a very weird situation. I think actually that Zoom situation is probably the best way that you can do, because we're all in self-isolation, all going stir crazy, all of us. We can all admit it. And I think it's a good thing that you reached out across the whole family, the whole country, the whole family and the whole country. Obvious in your states, Boston, Colorado, that's the whole country and your whole family. Reach across. And because this is something as a country we're dealing with, and I think, yes, as a country we should deal with, we should emotionally deal with it together. And I think the Seder, I'm sure the rate of suicide and domestic abuse in our communities probably went down because we have Passover. And when Easter comes up, what was this past weekend? I'm sure whatever Easter sermon that was, the rates would also fall, because those things are good things in life. And I think good things push away the bad.
I agree.
That's my one point. So it seems like we talked about the Zoom part of the Seder, because I imagine we don't have to talk so much about the specifics, because I imagine any Zoom, I didn't even notice that, Zoomer that lives around today definitely did some sort of Zoom Seder that wasn't too religious. Did you only have one
really
night of
quick
days
before
off?
we move on,
Oh, yeah.
I was looking back at one of the screenshots that we took because I was curious how many people showed up. So we had 9 different screens, and each screen has between 2 and 5 people in it.
Okay.
So I think we had closer to 30 people at our Zoom Seder this year.
That's wonderful. So you probably upgrade your numbers by either twice fold to like 50%, 150% of the actual number. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So
All right.
you said, did you practice 1 or 2 nights of the Seder?
So we normally have, in my family, we have one night where my family comes together. And
All right.
again, that's for a lot of reasons. Like, we've got babies and we have a lot of people who are busy. We have a lot of business owners in my family. And so a lot of them are oftentimes traveling, or
Entrepreneurs.
exactly. Entrepreneurs. Well, not even just entrepreneurs, but like my uncle is the CEO of his business. And he has been the CEO of his business for years.
Good for him. I just said entrepreneurs to say, like, to give it a label, because it seems like it runs in your family. Hard workers, hustlers, because maybe not, because I've known you're a manager at Starbucks. It seems like you hustled for your uncle when you worked out of his, what is it, advertising or something like that? I forget the specifics of your life. I'm sorry, Ruth, I didn't study for you.
What do you mean you didn't study the textbook? No. Just to clarify really quick, I was a barista for Starbucks. I was going to be a supervisor, but I was a department supervisor for a Jewish summer camp.
Okay, so like hustling, you were definitely somebody who doesn't just stay at the bottom rung of the ladder. You were definitely moving up, and that's why another reason why I jokingly called you Abba, because I looked up to you on those aspects.
You asked me to teach you to shave, I think, right?
Yeah, I think it was funny.
That was cute.
If you guys see my beard right now, it's kind of gross. I'm gonna see if I can grow a beard by the time I'm out of quarantine.
I mean, now is the time. I'm gonna dye my hair purple this week.
Okay, sounds like you have only 1 or 2 nights. So now I'm happy to hear your story about how the deli messed up your order, and how give us I hope that you thought it through, so you can give us the abridged funny version of the situation.
All right.
Let's bring down this podcast to a lower level, and let's talk about something funny. Let's laugh about your hardships.
So, all right. So I gotta say, it was a good thing that Grandma gave me the matzo ball soup recipe this past year.
Okay, that's a positive. Look at that.
You know,
That's the handing of knowledge from 2 generations in between to you. That's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I really do appreciate it. It was actually it was very cool to make it for my family this year. But so how the deli screwed up Passover for us this year, but it's fine because I fixed it. So my mom ordered this a huge amount of food from our local deli. She ordered enough matzo balls, enough broth, and enough noodles for like 4 people. We also ordered some desserts from them because after the Seder and after everything, we usually will start eating leavened foods again. But we'll eat unleavened food until we have like the Seder and the ceremony.
Like I said, your version of the holiday doesn't have to be the rabbinic interpretation, and I think that's as legitimate, or at a legitimate level. I wouldn't say as legitimate. I wouldn't give it that much power, but I would say at least has some legitimacy. So
Yeah.
the people who want to come at you, step back. You won't have it in my community. I will not welcome you if you think that's illegitimate.
People want to come at me, we can talk about it.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to be associated with those people.
So how they screwed this up was my mom gets home. She pulls out like these boxes of pastries. She pulls out this one little cup of noodles, and we order from this deli all the time. The noodles that they gave us was like less noodles for one person, and we ordered noodles for 3 people.
That's
so we didn't have enough. Yes, we didn't have enough fluxion for the broth. We had enough broth for one person and no matzo balls.
What?
They didn't give us any matzo balls for the matzo balls.
Like, I don't get that. Like, your deli, your job is to be good at deli stuff. How do you
like
mess up
matzo ball
so
soup.
bad? Like, how do you mess up so bad on an order that you, like, oh, this is enough food for 3 people? Let's divide that by 3. Like, how does somebody order enough food for 3 people and only have enough food for 1?
And so I was looking at these bags and I was like, I feel like you would notice if there was that much food missing. And I kind of pieced that together too. Because I was looking at how many boxes there were.
Did you notice it while you were there?
No, because my mom and my brother picked it up, and they weren't going to stay there because they're not going to stay in the deli for exactly, because Corona. Like, they're not going to stay with too many people for too long. They're going to get it and then get out. Like, and you're expecting that your order is going to be
the onus is not on you. It's the onus on the deli. Like, yeah, you probably should have checked your food before takeout. Like, I work at McDonald's, and I always let people know, double check things. I get paid $13 an hour. I'll try my hardest, but I'm not going to break my neck to get your food ready.
My mom said that she asked if there was, because there was one bag that was next to it that they didn't hand her, and she did ask if it was hers, and she did, like, because she called them back, and she was like, hey, like, you guys messed this up, and they did mess it up, so she called them back, and they did. I hope they did say that they did.
Did they charge you for the? Okay, good.
Yeah,
okay,
no, she got a refund.
She was like, that's the Jew in me.
Yeah.
That's the Jew in me. You better get a refund, and they better honor that refund. If not, you should make sure to get your food. Like, okay, then you're like, okay, then I'll eat that for dinner tonight. Can I get it?
Exactly.
Because you're paying for food, you better get your food.
So then, kind of true to the story of the Jews in Egypt, I braved the plague and went to the store, and I got some broth, and I got some other ingredients to make matzo ball soup.
Your personal exodus.
Yeah, my personal exodus. So I get to Target. There is no more noodles. There are no more noodles in the store at all.
Imagine,
and I'm not going to go to another one.
Non-perishable item.
Exactly.
I just put that out there. Run on the stores.
There was like one box of like chickpea noodles left. And so then
what did you throw together? Let's hear it.
So what I ended up throwing together, there was no chicken, there were no vegetables, and there were no noodles at the store. So I get home, I bring home my chicken broth, I find some frozen chicken that's in the freezer, and I throw that in the broth, and I start boiling that up to cook it, start getting the flavor in there. I start making the matzah meal. I put that in the fridge. I start letting it chill so I can make the balls in a few minutes. And then as that's going, I'm looking at what the restaurant has given us. And so I see that there's kind of like some vegetables in the broth. And
like you use that as your appetizers with a Hillel sandwich, I imagine. There's no reason to let it go to waste, of course.
No. I utilized the vegetables. And I added them to my broth.
Okay, so you did a little chemistry.
Yeah, and then of course I added a little the Jewish secret ingredients.
1 part mess up, 3 parts of grandma's recipe. I get it. Okay.
Exactly. Boobies love.
Okay, so a little bit of deli mess up times. Boobies love equals sounds like a decent soup Seder.
Yeah, so you know what? I made a makeshift matzo ball soup. It ended up really good, actually. The matzo balls had some really good flavor to them. And then I also found, this is really gross, actually, some gluten-free noodles that were just in my mom's pantry. I know. So I cooked, but I was like, you know what? We need to have like some kind of noodles or something. So I cooked them and I put them. And so if you wanted them in your broth, my mom and my brother, they added them to their broth. I didn't love them. So I had like a couple bites with the broth, but I had an extra matzo ball instead because those were good.
Okay. So it sounds like, all things considered, you got dealt a bad hand, and like all things in life, sometimes statistically you're going to get dealt bad hands. So the question is how you deal with it. It's not a
Oh
question.
yeah. You just
Yeah,
gotta
we
live and learn.
live and learn, live and let be. So it sounds like we are coming to a close of the amount of points that I want to say. And I just want to finish off with my Seder, and maybe you can learn a little bit from me, not just me learning from you, about how I dealt with my
Tell me
Seder.
about your Seder, Paul. How was your Passover? How's your
Uh,
family?
my family's doing great. We had a wonderful Seder. The two different Haggadahs we actually based off of is the family Haggadah Art Scroll Mezorah series. And the second night we did a Haggadah Shalpeos, the family participation Haggadah by Noam Zion and David Dishon. I'm not sure anybody, but I'm sure the family Haggadah by Art Scroll Mezorah is probably much more famous amongst the Jewish community, because Art Scroll is pretty big part of a big publisher in the Jewish community, at least as far as I know. And
We used the David Rasnick Haggadah.
so the first night we did off the family Haggadah, the Art School one. And this is the Haggadah that we use usually. And this is the one that goes into the outstretched arm and how many thumbs and how many fingers God has. I tell you, I really don't care. I really don't care. I don't have to tell you. I've already heard the story of the 4 kids every single year. We don't have to reiterate the same story. I remember. We all remember. I've done
Do
it.
you guys let Elijah in?
We do. We've done it 20 times, and I made sure to do it during the second night. Is my point is that I ran the Seder, and the way I ran the Seder is a discussion-based Seder. That, okay, what is Passover? Story of Exodus. Why do we do it every year? Is because the story of Exodus we have to live in our life. And what does that mean in 1945 or 1933 to basically 1929 to 1945? It means escaping the Holocaust. And Jews in America, it means surviving assimilation while keeping our cultural, ethnic, and religious Judaism alive. That was the discussion-based thing. So I literally went through the Haggadah, went by step. I still followed all, 15, 16 steps, I forget. We did the parts. I did the Hebrew, the importance parts. I said the 4 cups of wine in Hebrew. I made sure to do that. I made sure to have the Maggid, but we talked openly. The first night, I also want to add an additional podcast, is we had a Buddhist, my brother's girlfriend. She grew up Buddhist. I would love to hear her and have a separate podcast about Passover and get her experience it, because it was her first real unveiling of how wild Jews actually are. And I say the reason why Jews lasted 3,000 years, there's very few cultural groups that lasted so long, is because we're so crazy religiously.
Crazy.
A crazy statistic for you, there's about 5 to 10 different ethnic groups that lasted more than 2,000 years. One of them is Chinese, one of them is Jews, so one of them is Romans, Western civilization. One of them is a few of them are many different Native American tribes, some tribes in Africa, but Jews is one of those. And my hypothesis is because we do so much in the tradition, tradition, that is why. That is why there's some knowledge. So basically, I did the way I ran the Seder the second night at my house. It was a discussion-based Seder. First, we talked about the story of Exodus. Then I proposed the question, what does the story of Exodus means in our life? And then we talked about that. And then I proposed the next question of, okay, I see it as assimilation, our thing. Let's talk about that. And then that's how I dealt with it. That's how I dealt with the Seder. With each prong, I looked at the meta of the point. And then we talked about it. We went through the Seder, the outstretched arm, we glossed over that point. We talked about being a Jew in America, because that's our exodus. Make sure to keep our Judaism without assimilating too much, while staying, at least, I think Jews are a bunch of racist people, TBH. And that's a totally another podcast. Literally, you look at the word goy. Goy means outsider, other, with a sort of negative connotation. I think Judaism should have another great schism where modern Orthodox should separate themselves from the Haredi and other movements, because those are the movements that are they're homophobic. They stone people who walk in their neighborhoods with shorts. I want to disassociate with those things, and I want another schism of modern Orthodox Jews. And that's how I
agree with you. I agree with you, especially on the Jews being kind of racist. I mean, I wouldn't be considered Jewish to most Orthodox people, especially those who live in Israel.
Guess what? Me and you would be together, and them in the gas chambers. It doesn't matter. Anti-Semitism is alive, and that's a unifying factor. I don't care. That's a unifying factor the world chooses for us. That doesn't matter, but that we would be together. And fun fact, all you have to do is be 1/4 Jewish to have like a right to move to Israel, immigrate to Israel.
Wherever you
I think.
go, there's always someone Jewish.
Hmm.
You're never alone when you say you're a Jew.
So I would love to hear your opinion on my Seder. How do you like about the discussion-based Seder? Do you think you might associate some of those ideas into your Seder next year?
It sounds
Propose the
beautiful and
question.
engaging.
Like I made sure every person in the Seder table had as a point to say, okay, maybe the point wasn't as long as everyone else, but it gave them the opportunity to speak on each of those points.
I like that. That's kind of similar to how like my Seder is scripted. So like everybody has an opportunity to say something and that helps everybody to be engaged. And so I really like that you included that. And it's honestly something that I very much value about you that you have obviously included in this is that you want to hear what other people have to say.
Yes.
And you are actually, it's not even just like that you just want them to talk. It's you're actually interested in what they have to
Hmm.
say and you want to engage and you want
I'll
to
take that.
you,
I'll take
you
that
want to
even
learn
deeper.
from them.
I'll take that even deeper. Every single aspect of your life, you should learn from it. From your movies to your TV shows to your pillow. Your pillow is soft. Why is your pillow soft? So you can sleep well. Okay, what about a throw pillow on the couch? Why is it soft? Why is a throw pillow on a couch harder than a pillow for you to sleep? Oh, because it should be also support. Every single thing in life you can learn from. Okay, you don't want you go insane if you actually think about you have to relax every so often. So you shouldn't think hard about everything. But if you're trying to actually learn a lesson, you can learn a lesson from everything. And that's how I lived my life. And that's why I am the way I am. People always sometimes ask me, why are you happy all the time? That is why I came to the final conclusion. I want to be happy because the world's a great place. I'm not happy because I'm happy because life is great. And I thought about how great it is, not because life is great, because of both those points. Life itself is suffering. And to think that life itself isn't suffering, there's no difference between us and other animals. We just choose an evolutionary path that made us really smart and an apex predator, and they chose the evolutionary path that focused on eyesight, focused on flying, that focused on other things. Like we split from chimpanzees, I think 8.5 million years, great apes 7 million or something, whatever. I think our closest relative is like 7.5. There used to be other species of humans, quote unquote humans. I don't know how you define human. And my point is you can learn from everybody. And that's how I modeled my Seder, the Seder of the great rabbis of our past, because that's how they modeled their Seder. They literally talked about it. And that's what we're reading about. The great rabbis talking about these things, the things that were important to them. Those things that are important to them were 2,000 years ago. So of course, it's not important to us. So we should have talked about the important things today for our personal exodus. That's the point. Ledor Vidor, every generation. So that's how I modeled my Seder. Ledor Vidor, generation and generation, generation to generation. Anything else, Ruth, you want to say before we wrap this up?
I mean, I'm really interested to continue our talks. I'm interested to continue on with all the podcasts that we're going to do, especially hearing you talk about like all these values and everything that you're hoping to that you do incorporate into your life, that you want to help incorporate in other people's lives.
Yes, I live my life to the best way I can be. I let my Yetzer Tov, my good side, take over. I'm saying if I would grade myself, I give myself an A minus. That's the brass tacks. I know I'm still working on humility, but with the brass tacks, I give myself an A minus, all things considered. Also, privilege scale, I also give myself a 9.5. My life was literally on easy mode. My life was so easy. Why? Because of my grandparents and my parents. I stand on the back of giants. I owe everything to them.
Good of you to acknowledge them. I mean, as far as anything else I want to say, I do generally want to say to anybody who's listening, please stay safe, stay healthy, and this is the only other time I'm going to curse. Stay the hell inside, please. If you don't have to work, don't go to work. If you do need to work, go to work, because we do need to have some people who are keeping jobs going. But if you aren't, like, you're just spreading, stay home.
I will counter that point with, no, don't just stay inside, because mental and physical health, domestic abuse is health. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to go to the park if you stay within the CDC guidelines. You don't have to murder your social and mental health just to stop the coronavirus spread. Distance yourself from people. If you read the guidelines, understand a basic level of biology and calculus to actually truly understand this, there's ways that you can keep you healthy. Okay, if you don't understand enough, stay inside and video chat. If not, hang out with people from outside from at least 10 to 15 feet away. I know the CDC says 6 feet for outside, but be abundantly safe. I
I
think
guess
that's
I meant more of like stay inside, like
socially distanced.
like stay away from people. And you know what?
Exactly.
I'm going to say one thing about your park really quick. So I wouldn't even say do things like go to the park, and here's why.
I want to say that yes, people are stupid. I will say that. A lot of people are stupid.
People are stupid.
I'm saying,
but that's not
if
why.
you understand please counter.
So here's like what's really important to me. I live in an interesting part of the Palm Springs area because right next to me is the mountains. Like my house is surrounded by the mountains, and there are a lot of hiking trails. And what happened with the start of this whole COVID-19 thing was when they started to close down the parks, people started parking in my neighborhood to go walking in these natural areas. And so it was then an issue, and we had some law enforcement that were around my area clearing people out because we had people who were just trying to go to the park parking in my neighborhood, which then made it difficult for me, the person who lives there, to comfortably walk around my neighborhood and keep enough distance from people to stay healthy for me.
Well, I would say that is definitely the case. Do not go to the park. If the park is densely populated, do not go to the park. I think it's you have to, if you understand the situation. If you don't understand the situation, don't leave your house, obviously. But if you understand the situation and you can make that moral argument, at least to a police officer without yelling, and say, hey, I need this for my mental health. It's important to me to enjoy the outdoors as it's important to any people. This is not okay for the long run. That should be another podcast I'm happy to have an hour or two conversation about. And
for sure. Like go for a walk in the middle of the desert. Just don't come to my neighborhood. Don't come to my neighborhood park. Don't come to my neighborhood trails.
Go visit the Grand Canyon.
In the middle of the desert. You have literally the whole entire desert to drive into and walk amongst. Don't come to my street.
Don't go to the popular parks. Go to the non-known. Let me say a good way to say it. Don't go to the parks that are on page 1 of Google. Go to the parks on page 2.
Go camping in the middle of nowhere by yourself. That's what I did for my birthday. I went for a drive. I went for a drive up through Anza by myself, and it was beautiful up in the mountains there.
I want to finish this off with what can we learn from this podcast specifically? And I wrote down a few things that I learned from you. First, baseline, be better. You inspired me to be better. Based off of our conversation. B, let's keep our density down, coronavirus related. Let's limit the amount of reactions. If any of the story that I learned from you is the story about the deli messing up, is that Corona caused that. No doubt Corona caused that. Whoever was on the phone probably wasn't paying attention enough because they were stressing about something else because of Corona or whatever, about everyone's Passover.
And I bet a ton of people were ordering from there because they couldn't get noodles from the store.
I know. And that's probably it is. And their supply lines as a business is probably not as messed up as our supply lines as consumers. I know in the case of, that's where I got. Okay, so I should have done a little bit better of writing notes down across. But if you have anything you've learned from this podcast, please share, because that's my point. Let's learn together. That's the slogan of this podcast. If anything, let's figure this out together. And I think I figured out a few more things than most people. So that's why I'm preaching from I feel a little preachy. I'm not trying to be preachy, but I'm just trying to show that I'm learning from doing. So do as well. And that's my point. That's my biggest lesson from this. Learn by doing. And sometimes good enough is sometimes good enough. It's called Goldilocks. Too hot, too cold, sometimes just right.
You're here.
Any other things you want to finish off? I give you the opportunity to finish off this podcast. Anything, you have a podcast of your own that you want to push, anything that you want to push forward, any last message that you want to push forward as your end bit?
Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane. Just stay okay if you can.
Thank you. Okay, so that is it, folks. Ruth White's wise last words is stay sane, stay healthy, stay as good as you can. I'm going to finish the recording right now.